Hello, everybody, and welcome to the True North Audio Podcast, episode 01, maybe, our little test inaugural episode. I'm your host, Kiko. Joining me today, my regular host, although this week, my guest, Toby Allen. Welcome to the show.
Hello. How's it going?
Going well.
Good.
So on the show, we are going to be talking about the creation of albums and specifically the creation of his new album. We'll give him a chance to talk about that in a sec, but just a quick kind of idea of what we're going to be doing with this show going forward. We kind of just want to celebrate the songwriting process and just what it takes to write a good album and enjoy talking to the people involved in it and hearing what they have to say about their process and about the things they care about when they're writing and the things that kind of inspired the stories of the songs, or not stories if there's no songs. So let's get into it. Toby, why don't you introduce yourself and the album?
All right. So this is an album I've been working on for a little while. The oldest song on it I probably wrote like 2016 or maybe, around 2016, I think. And it's kind of it's dragged on a little bit longer than I would have liked, but for good reason, I think. And I think the wait has been worth it.
As can be the case.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we tracked drums in 2019. And obviously there was a big worldwide thing that happened soon after that, which kind of changed things. And I also joined up with Unstoppable Recording Machine. And the whole point of me joining up with that particular recording school was to make this album the best I could possibly make it. And I kept getting better at recording and mixing and all the other fun stuff. And I got to the point where I was like, well, I don't really want to do this album because if I do it now, next month I'll think, oh, I could have done so much better. So I kind of just put it on the back burner until I felt like I was plateauing a bit more.
Yeah, and this album is actually somewhat relevant to how we met and just kind of our journey together as a whole. As, of course, mentioned earlier, Toby is the other half of True North Audio. He and I are the basically co-founders, co-owners. And originally, we had met in a project that one of my friends had going, like one of my old friends. He had joined up as their new guitarist. And we were chatting in that group, and that's kind of how we got to meet. And he started showing me some of the old demos and old versions of these songs. And so this album, this album has been a part of our friendship since we started talking, really from the beginning. So it's been very interesting to see this whole journey. And of course, it even predates us knowing each other.
It does, yeah. It's funny as well because because this project, Wraak, is kind of born out of a previous project, which is kind of still on the back burner, but that previous project called Bezalel. And when we met, I was still working on an album with that project, and I finished it, and I was super proud of it, and I sent it to you, and you're like, yeah, this is really rough. And I was like, how dare you?
A lot of tact, not quite as much diplomacy.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. But that kind of inspired me to think, well, the next thing I make needs to be much better. So yeah, that's where the whole URM thing came in.
Yeah, and I'd at least put the URM, kind of the URM worm into your ear there a little bit early on too.
Yeah.
Because I'd been involved since 2016, 2015, a long time now, quite a long time, pretty much from the earliest ones. And so I evangelize URM as a source of learning. I mean, I've gotten so much out of it. Of course, Toby would now, and not just because he works for them now. He would just evangelize them anyway.
Yeah. There's definitely, that's, I'd agree. It's kind of like it's pretty revolutionary as far as everything involving making music has gone. And like you say, I now do some work for them, so even more so now.
And of course, they play a huge role in this album as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Not only did they teach you a lot of amazing tricks that have made you a much, much better engineer. And I mean, listening to the old demos versus this stuff now, it's night and day. But also got you in touch with a few people that got involved as well. Because you got a few of our buddies on there.
Yeah. So there's, we'll probably get more into the nitty gritty when we talk about the individual songs. But yeah, we've got orchestration from Ben Turk, who is the drummer and orchestrator from Glory Hammer, which is very cool.
Yep.
Been a big fan of Glory Hammer since like 2016, I think. So that's really cool. And then we've got Ruben did the mix, who I met through a little bit through URM and a little bit actually through the six-figure home studio. Profitable producer course.
Yeah.
And we've also, we've had some, Luke did some vocals, and we've got Ryan did a guitar solo for me. Mike Mallion, the drummer of Monuments, because of URM, gave me a drum lesson, which absolutely revolutionized a lot of my... I basically went back and redid all the drum programming on the album after like a 40-minute conversation with him.
gave you some amazing tools for how to just write it and voice it like a drummer. And think about it like a drummer, because that's something I've talked about plenty of times. Obviously Toby knows, we've talked about it all the time, but the way that a lot of guitarists I've noticed would program their drums to be played by someone who has four arms, or just not make any sense, And being able to actually program them and think of them like a drummer is very important.
Yeah.
And so you got that as well, which I think shows very much. There's a lot of really cool little details. And then Luke and Ruben, for example, they're in another project with us called Bloody Pineapples. I know the name is dumb, but it's so much fun. Who cares? We love doing it. And
it's a dumb name, but it's dumb riffs as well.
Exactly. It's dumb heavy. It's a dumb name for a dumb heavy band.
Yeah, exactly.
We're working on a song right now. We'll be working on some stuff later. You'll get to hear about that in a later episode when we bring in a couple of our guys and talk about the writing process for the album we're going to be working on later this summer. But for now, we were talking about this album.
We are.
So, first question, of course, kind of an obvious question, but when you're writing, where does your writing process start? How do you like to start, and how do you like to kind of get everything together and finish it off? What's your path?
I've got a few different methods or a few different paths. And the great things with this album is that I actually used lots of different methods with different songs. So, like, for example, I'm just trying to think of an example. Let's say CPJ. So I think that started out with... it's just started out with me with playing guitar, and as soon as if I'm playing guitar, I'm just literally just noodling about and messing about. As soon as I start having even the inkling of an idea, I'll open up Guitar Pro and start tabbing it out. Mm-hmm. So with CPJ, it was that first intro riff. I just tabbed that in, and then I'm listen back to it, and I'm like, well, what would come next? I think this will come next, and then the verse riff just came out, and well, what happens after the verse riff? It's going to go into a chorus. What does the chorus sound like? Well, the chorus, let's just mess around with a couple of chords and then tab that in, and it's that sort of feedback of like I tab it in and then listen back. And no, that's wrong. I changed that, and no, there we go, we got that. And then what goes on top of that? And the great thing is with that is Guitar Pro will play me back what I've tabbed in, and I can play along to it. So then I can come up with some they've got the main power chords, but then there's like the harmonizing octave chords over the top, and I can just play those while listening to the power chords back, and it kind of just builds and builds in that way. That's like, I'd say that's probably my main writing method, just coming up with a riff and then building around it. Then we've got Walking in a Winter Wasteland. That was kind of more... It was actually kind of like recycling some old riffs from ages ago. Like ages and ages ago, I opened up GarageBand This is before I even had Logic, I think. And I literally put in a Easy Drummer drum loop and just like dragged it so it was like 5 minutes long, just this one loop. And I was like, right, I'm going to record as many riffs as I can to these drums. And my limitation is going to be I'm not allowed to do any palm mutes. And bear in mind, like, a lot of my riff writing revolves around chugs and palm mutes. So sort of that kind of limitation is going to give me some crazy stuff. And the intro riff and the verse riff were both in that project. And,
Very cool.
And I just opened up and I was like, oh, I'd forgotten about these riffs. I wonder if I can use these. And I just like tabbed them out and then just started building the rest of the song around that.
Just kind of stitch it all together, get it all glued.
Yeah. And then CBA TBH was more of I had a concept in my head. There's that song is about kind of laziness, and I just thought the sort of frustration about when someone's lazy and you're kind of relying on them to do something and they just can't be bothered. And how does that frustration sound? And then that's where those riffs came from. I'm just like, I want something that sounds like this emotion and this feeling. And
it's
then
very much
just
musical storytelling.
Let the hands do the work. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's pretty much my method, I'd say.
So very much.
Sometimes it'll be I'll put the drums and then I'll write to the drums, but mostly it'll be I'll come up with a riff and then write the drums to that.
Yeah. So for the most part, you're starting off on kind of your comfortable instrument, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and of course, I noticed that you have a lot of very very guitar focused music. Of course, again, being a guitarist, you can kind of tell that's where a lot of your influence lies. A lot of great solos throughout, a lot of great riffing, a lot of great sort of breaks, and even in the mix, I noticed, of course, you have the guitars up a bit, which is to be expected.
Yeah, I think if anything, the guitars were probably, if I was mixing this, I probably would have had the guitars even louder than they were.
Very much like a guitarist.
Yeah, exactly.
So, of course, you've been working on this one, like you said, 2016 was 6 years ago. You've been working on this for a while. Do you feel like, I mean, I guess the answer must be yes, but over those years, how do you feel like your workflow has changed and what has this album taught you? What have you really learned from it?
That's a good question. I think almost taking a little bit of a break from it in like 2020 and kind of focusing on the Bloody Pineapples Collab Smash thing. So Collab Smash is basically in URM, there's like a monthly competition where you're given a brief and it's like you've got to write a song that sounds like Gojira, or you've got to write a song that sounds like Rammstein or whatever. And so we were coming up with new songs every month. And I feel like, if anything, that has kind of taught me more about writing quickly and just getting the idea down and out and moving on. And I feel like that's kind of something I could have applied more to this album.
After that,
just
after
get it
that
done
long,
and move on.
Yeah. So I assume then you mean that especially it taught you committing to an idea or a riff or a piece.
Yeah, I think because like I would agree with that, because when I was first working on this, I was like down that rabbit hole trying to find tones, and it was around the time ML SoundLab came along, and I started using that, and then Neural was becoming a big thing, so I started using that, and then I got a new amp and I started using that, and just it's like I'd have the idea, like, right, this is the tone, and then another plugin would come out, like, oh yeah, I'm going to use this, and then another amp sim would come out, oh no, I'm going to use this. This is going to be the tone, and I've kind of thought now that like what I would do in the future is literally record the tone on the way in. Yeah. Especially now I've got a real amp collection and stuff. It's much easier to do. But I think sometimes having the DI is good as a fallback, and it helps with editing, definitely. Yeah. And it helps to visualize, and you've got the option there to reamp if you need to and stuff. But I think become a big fan of committing on the way in. So I think getting that amp sound as you record it and then leave it.
I think there's something to be said for recording with an amp too, especially with an amp in the room, but being able to just kind of hear your sound as you're playing it, I think is really big.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I absolutely get that. And a little bit of kind of behind the scenes, just Toby and I being friends for so many years now, is the fact that we've known each other long enough. I've seen you rubber band pretty hard back and forth between amp sims and real amps and amp sims and real amps. And, you know, I've definitely heard you say like, oh man, with Neural and ML, I don't know if I'm even going to be using my real amps. And then you'll get like the, 5153. And then you're saying, man, I love Neural and STL, but this live amp, this is my amp. I don't even know how much I'm using the sims and very much a workflow. And of course you've been bouncing back and forth through the creation process of this record. Very much.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, like I said, it was when ML Soundline Roots came out. I was like, this is it. This is what I'm using. This is absolutely what I'm using. There's 4 different amps in this plugin, but I'll be using all 4 of those, and it'll be just this plugin. And then, like I say, it kind of went on the back burner, and then Neural Gojira came out, and I was like, this is the sound I'm going to use. And yeah, I mean, like when it comes to actually sims these days, I pretty much just kind of stick to the one preset I like on Gojira, and I just use that just for noodling. And it's almost actually part of my reamping workflow as well. Like I'll get a set of DIs, and I'll just put a Neural Gojira on and listen for a few seconds, and that will then inform me which of my real amps I want to use. Yeah, because I'm so used to that one preset, and I've heard it so much. It's almost like, a mixer knows their speakers or their headphones really, really well, and so therefore they can make informed decisions on their mixing because of that environment. And it's almost like Gojira is that for me. I can put that on something, and I'm like, okay, now I've heard it through Gojira. I know what it will sound like through my Orange, or I know what it will sound like through my 5150 kind of thing.
Yeah, it gives you somewhat of a baseline. I found for my part, because I work with a lot of other guitarists when I'm like reamping and just dealing with DIs, I tend to find that the DI specifically is the part that I hear that I can listen to it and I can go, yes, when I put it through this or that, I'm going to have too much of this kind of noise or not enough of that kind of noise, or it's going to be really bright, or it's going to be really, transient or something. And yeah, I think, especially as a songwriter, since you're dealing with your own riffs and stuff, being able to kind of have a baseline that you can work off of and kind of know what you're going to sound like doing anything can really speed up the process, which is another thing that I know about you, having been friends for so many years, is that you're very much into like hacking your workflow.
Definitely.
You've been sending me a lot of photos of the studio lately.
Oh yeah. So I mean, part of that comes down to being a dad. So that obviously limits the time that I have available to me to actually do audio stuff. So anything I can do to make anything quicker, even if it's like I've set up a macro on my Stream Deck so that I can do something that requires 4 clicks in 1 click. And it's like that doesn't save much time, but over the course of vocalizing a whole album's worth of vocals, that saves a lot of time. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, even just like your pedal board, you've been sending me fun little photos about how you've kind of streamlined your pedal board and your amp setup and everything for reamping, and even your new little mic clip for the guitar cabinets. Yeah, just little things that kind of cut down on the hassle of setting things up and tearing them down.
Yeah, I mean, some people say about like, oh, an amp sim is so much easier to dial in. It's so much quicker. You can just open the plug-in or whatever. And I was like, yeah, that's true.
Maybe it is with Gojira for sure.
Definitely. But like with the way I've got my amp set up now, it doesn't, it's kind of almost counterintuitive going back to what I said a minute ago about doing things that save seconds of time. But it takes me like 10 seconds to set up my 5150 and start recording with it. And that includes, turning on the power and connecting up a noise gate and connecting up an overdrive. Like I say, there's less than 10, 30 seconds for me to set up and I'm going. Yeah. And that's that's much quicker than I'm a big fan of things being out. Like, it's like people say about I wish I could sort of practice guitar more, and it's like, well, if you had them guitars out on a rack, then you can just pick it up and play it. Whereas if it's in a case, in a cupboard, or in the loft or whatever, you got to get it out, you got to check it's in tune, you got to dust it off, and all that other stuff. So if you're using something regularly, have it out and have it ready to go.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I set up my studio as well. I want what I'm going to use easily on hand. And I mean, I remember my old roommate, he was huge into playing guitar all the time. Specifically, I remember he would come home from work with a riff in his head, and there'd be moments there'd be, if I'm home, I'm cooking dinner or whatever, he busts through the door, and they're like, oh, hey, what's up? He's like, no, hold that thought. I got to take care of something. And he'll run off into his room, and he's got a guitar set up already ready to go. It just plugs it in. He like sits his phone on the desk, and he's recording this riff that he's been like humming to himself in his head for the last 5 hours at work. Being ready to
trying not to forget it.
Yeah, exactly. Like being on top of that sort of thing as a songwriter for sure. And I can definitely attest to the fact that helps a lot, having your tools on hand. For me, I'm most comfortable with synthesizers. So I've got a MIDI controller on my desk and another one in the other room and another one over on the side ready to go. I can basically just pull up a synthesizer anytime and play around.
I think Dimebag used to have a guitar in every room and a tape recorder in every room. And like he'd even be sitting on the toilet and an idea would come to him and he'd just grab the guitar and hit record and he'd just record a song there and there on the toilet,
Oh, yeah. No, I believe that for sure, especially with Dimebag. I've seen that video tour that Ola did with his place. I can only imagine.
Yeah. So I don't quite have that. But I have one time when I was doing the Bezalel album, I remember pulling over to the side of the road and pulling my phone out and just singing like a bunch of riffs and ideas into my phone. And then when I got home, I actually, just first thing I did, come home and sit and listen to that, and then tabbed out the entire song in one sitting. And the funny thing is that that was kind of like when you come to the end of it, you listen to the song, you're like, oh, that's kind of like a very Amon Amarth inspired song, and it is, it's basically a rip-off of Pursuit of Vikings. But the weird thing is, what inspired me to write that song? A David Bowie song on the radio.
That's one of those things too I talk about with people all the time, is I think that really one of the best ways to write unique feeling music is you got to either be completely disconnected and never ever listen to any music of any kind and not know what music is or what it sounds like, or you have to be listening to everything so much that David Bowie inspires you to write an Amon Amarth song.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean,
have so many roots that they're easy enough to hide.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the thing is, I mean, are you familiar with a book called Where Ideas Come From?
I don't think so.
Okay. So it's basically like the sort of like the too long didn't read version of the whole book is all ideas are basically a smashing together of two other ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And that is basically it. And it's just kind of talking about like the evolution of ideas throughout history and how like air conditioning came along because I can't even remember I think it was like they wanted to, I can't remember the exact thing, but it was like they wanted to do this thing. But it was only because these two other ideas came along that then someone thought, oh, if I can put those two together, I can do this thing. And like actually air conditioning was a side effect of what he was actually making. But I think I kind of approached that idea with songwriting. It's almost like what would a Bowie song sound like if it was written by Amon Amarth kind of thing? And then it's like those two ideas come together, and then they end up going off in a different direction. And like Walking in a Winter Wasteland was, what would it sound like if you mixed up Gojira and Amon Amarth? And it kind of, I don't think it really particularly sounds like either of those, but it kind of does,
Well, and our buddy Tony, he's like an old bandmate of mine, and he's been friends with us for a long time as well. We'll have to have him on the show later on too. He's just he's actually put out 2 albums this year.
Oh, really?
But he's very much one of those guys. Yeah, right. He's one of those guys for sure that has a lot of those roots. And I've noticed over the years, like I listened to his, like I've been friends with him basically since his first little demo CD that he recorded in his garage with a Casio keyboard. And, you know, early on, you can hear that very much. It's just his roots are Avenged Sevenfold, you know, and Bullet for My Valentine. That's kind of his thing. But you listen to him now, especially the one he just put out, or maybe it's about to come. I'm not sure if it's just dropped or it's about to drop. We're somewhere within days before or after as we record this. But he very much has he very much has that situation as well, where you listen to his stuff and he's got tiny little roots of all kinds of stuff. It'll be that, you know, Bullet for My Valentine kind of sound, but he'll have like Devin Townsend, and then he'll have a little bit of like reggaeton because he was just listening to reggaeton that week and just really into that as well. Brilliant. You know, and I think that I think there's something really cool to be said about when you reach that point where your sound is unique because you are just kind of doing what sounds cool to you. You know, the same thing. Like if you want your band to have an identity, it's almost kind of a good idea to kind of sit down and think to yourself, like, you know, okay, I'm a metal band. I want to shred. I want to make really like dumb, heavy riffs or whatever. But it's kind of cool to sit down and go like, now what's my guilty pleasure? You know, what's the music that I'm not allowed to listen to as a metalhead or whatever? What makes me uncool? How do I make that cool or whatever? It's like, I don't know, like, yeah, I'm really into like the My Little Pony soundtrack or something. You know, you can take that elements of that kind of bright, happy kind of, you know, like cartoon show music, and you can put that into the metal and you can use that to create like a unique, interesting hook in the riff, and it'll disappear. The roots of it will just kind of blend in. You won't even notice it, but it can give you your voice in a way.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. You raise that point because like literally in the last moments of me recording this album, in the last kind of when I was doing the vocals, I think I sent over maybe to you a like a raw, just literally just the vocals of a chorus of one of the songs or whatever, and I was like, this sounds like Boys to Men or something. And it was I think it's just like because my daughter watches a lot of Disney stuff,
right,
and I think it's just like that just kind of bled into my subconscious. and it's just like I had this like crazy last minute idea with some of the songs, like what if I just went absolutely mental with the harmonies, and like instead of like with the vocal harmonies, like you'd not, you know, whenever I've written vocal harmonies in the past, it's always been you've got the main lead, and then you've got like a third, and then you've got a fifth, and maybe an octave, and that's it. Whereas this, I was doing a lot of like really out there harmonies. I think I listened to CBA TBH, for example, and like the verse harmonies, they really make me think of something. I can't think what it is, but it's almost like there's like a Beatles energy going on in those vocals, and it's like this is not the kind of vocals you have in this kind of song, but it kind of works.
Certainly not imagine what you were thinking of having when you started the album too.
No, and I think that it's almost like when I was getting near the end, I'm like, oh, this sounds, this whole album kind of almost, maybe it's just because I know I've seen the sausage being made sort of thing.
Yeah.
With the writing, that it's like, this feels very, very derivative. Whereas now with the vocal harmony thing that I kind of tried to implement, it has its own more of an identity. More unique.
And I think that, I mean, it's funny too, you're mentioning like Boys to Men and kind of complicated vocal harmonies and that just that kind of like early boy band thing going on. And I mean, again, talking about our buddy Tony, my old roommate, all three of us used to jam, I mean, still do, but like there was a time where it was like all three of us would like get together and put on their records and hang out together. But there's a Swedish sort of boy band metal band called Dead by April, you know?
Okay.
And they're a great example of that, like letting your guilty pleasure be part of your identity and just having your own voice. They are very unique. And I remember an interview with Travis Neal from Divine Heresy, and he was talking about, you know, I think he was asked like, what artists are really exciting you right now? And he was saying like, I think Dead by April are one of those bands that are doing something no one else is doing. They really excite me, and I think that
I'll have to check them out.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things that as a songwriter is kind of important to keep in mind. Just lean into what you enjoy making, make music you want to hear, even if it's a little bit weird, and sometimes it'll be really obvious. Like, none of your songs for that influence or that vocal harmony kind of idea felt like a boy band song or a Dead by April song, but you two have that same kind of inspiration in a way. Whereas in yours, like, I'm hearing more Trivium or something, or more Amon Amarth, or the things I know that you listen to and that I can clearly hear as influences in your style.
I mean, the thing is, like with when I'm listening to, and this is what I was saying about the whole thing about it feeling derivative. Like, it's almost like this song is a rip off of a specific Trivium song, and this song is a rip off of a specific Archspire song or whatever. And it's like, and I think. Yeah. Again, I don't know whether that's just my own perspective on it, or where someone else will listen to it and go, "Yeah, this is a rip off of this song." But I mean, but saying about that kind of thing, like in CBA TBH, there's the chorus line, the melody of the chorus. I was just kind of like I was listening in my head one day when I was out the riff of the chorus. I was like, got to come up with a melody, and then I started humming this melody. I was like, I think this is it. And then I'm like, hang on, this is the guitar line from Tragedy by the Bee Gees. And then I'm like, I don't even care, I'm keeping it.
Once again, definitely a little bit more unusual one, when you're talking a metal album for someone who listens to Amon Amarth and Archspire, the Bee Gees.
Yeah, it's like you've got this song that's definitely a rip-off of the Trivium, but it's got like Beatles vocals in the verse, and it's got Bee Gees melody in the chorus. It's like, what?
And let's be real, the Bee Gees were cripplingly uncool if you were a metalhead during the disco age. You would have been crucified for saying that.
Yep.
But I think at the same time, this album would probably have blown away a lot of people in the 70s. It's certainly a lot heavier than a lot of what was going on back then. A lot of what people were calling metal at the time.
Yeah, actually, you're saying that. It made me think of a time when I went in the guitar shop, and I just ordered my 8-string, my first 8-string guitar, and I went in this guitar shop where it's mostly it's not even a guitar shop, it's a music shop, and they've got like a few guitars at the back and a few strings and things. But there's mostly like the pianos, violins, and saxophones, all those kind of instruments. And I go in and I was like, I'm looking for an 8-string set, and the guy goes, 8-string set? Do you tune down to drop C? I'm like, no, actually, I'm going to be tuning down to drop E. And he looked like he was going to have a heart attack. Well, I could just imagine someone hearing the album in the 70s and being like, did you tune your guitar down to E flat? Like, no. It's got 7 strings. What? What?
So all of this, of course, is to say that the next album is going to heavily sample the intro to the Peppa Pig soundtrack or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe there'll be a little bit of Bluey influence in the next album.
There you go. See, not very metal, but very metal. Love it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, this album has been. If there was one theme to this album, I would say it's just frustration. Like, lyrically, it's like an outlet of when feeling frustration, and this is what comes out. And I was thinking, with the next album, would it be like positivity, and then that's what comes out? But I mean, who knows? Can you even have a metal album where the theme is positive? Is that even legal?
I think Luke would very much have to step in immediately and say yes. I think he's been very much on the train of really evangelizing positive metal, and the fact that screaming doesn't have to be angry. You can also just scream because you're excited about something or whatever, you just want to loudly proclaim something. I mean, I definitely do have a lot of albums I listen to that I would describe as being very positive metal. But yeah, I mean, absolutely.
In some ways, you can say like Gojira is kind of positive, but in like they highlight negative things, but then try to like inspire
look at the bright
positivity.
Side. Yeah, I think inspire positivity, I think, is a good way of putting it for them.
But yeah, just what you were saying about the screaming, I just remembered there's a Funeral for a Friend song, and there's a line that's screamed by the drummer. It's just a thank you. And that's what the scream is like. Thank you.
Well, I mean, heck, there's plenty of really positive August Burns Red songs. There's also totally. Crunkcore, stuff just like it's all really heavy party music.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, you can bring out any emotion you want. It's, I think, Sleeper puts it best when they say we can't sing quietly because there's more to this than you think. It's just, it can very much be just an elation or celebration of something as much as a frustration. So, and I mean, a lot of things have changed in the time since you started this record. I mean, a big one being that you have a family, You've got a 2-year-old daughter now who wasn't even born when you had started on this. And I imagine that has greatly shifted perspective on a lot of things, especially your songwriting and the kind of message you want to put across. And I imagine even on some level, just working on an album that you want to show your daughter and that she can listen to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've got a video of her when I was writing Altered State, and she's sat in her high chair in the studio with me, and she's headbanging along. It's absolutely hilarious. So, and she would have been about 9 months old. So that's quite funny.
very much your father's daughter for sure.
Yeah.
And on that note, or I guess maybe just on a continuing note, what do you think you would actually do differently? Looking back on everything, what do you think would be the things you would change if you could? If you weren't committing, if you had just a little bit more time or whatever, or what things you'll be changing in the next album based on what you've learned from this one?
I think mostly the vocals. I would have practiced more before recording them, for one thing. Because when I listen back, I'm like, the only thing that kind of like I have a little twinge of like, I wish that was different, is the vocals. And let's say it's the only thing really.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of the actual like process, I think I would have, like I said before, would have committed on the way in, the tones. I would have tried harder to get an actual bassist to play rather than programming the bass, maybe. I might have put some more. I think, I would have loved to have had a real drummer playing the drums.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it comes down to the expense, and I was kind of being a bit of a control freak about it as well. And I just wanted to just improve my chops on drum programming generally anyway. It's just something I'd like to be good at. And I feel like actually that's something I have learned a lot from doing this album, is being a better drum programmer. But I think I would have just. I think it was a big revelation for me was getting Ruben to mix it as well, because that was another reason I was kind of dragging my heels on it, because I'm not the best mixer by far, and it's not my strength when it comes to making music. So I should have just focused on what my strengths are and got some Ruben on board sooner.
We've during the creation process of this recently, especially, we've been, I've kept telling Toby like, oh man, imagine you're showing yourself this, when you started it, when we met or whatever. Imagine going back to like 2017 and showing this record to your previous self. And I think the mixing kind of is a big breakthrough in that way, because when I met you, when you were very first sending me those things, I mean, like you said, you joined URM to mix it. I feel like at that time, if you had showed yourself that album, said, yeah, somebody else mixed it, not having heard the album yet, you probably would have been, well, that's ridiculous. Why didn't I mix it? Until, of course, you heard the album, and heard what Ruben did for you, because you guys have such a a great rapport. And you were telling me, just the other day how, he very, like, the two of you click very much, and he very much just kind of gives you your vision when you hear that record and when you hear your stuff mixed by him. But yeah, I mean, when I first met you, I definitely could not have imagined you sending it out to be mixed, especially to somebody who's not like one of the big 4 mixers or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I could have imagined if I had the budget to get Andy Sneap to mix it.
Yeah, of course. But like your buddy from somewhere else, I could not have imagined you just getting like, this is a dude I work with and hang out with, having him mix it, because I imagine like, well, I could mix it. And yeah, I think that's one of those things is kind of, I feel like from my perspective, having watched the process, seeing you kind of let go of the reins on some things and, just knowing that you can trust someone to do this particular piece or this particular part of the project.
And the thing is as well, it's... Oh, go on, sorry.
I was saying, I think Ruben's a big part of that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, like, thinking about it from, like, a mindset perspective, that if you've only got so much energy and... just get energy, I guess, that you can put into a project. And you get to a point where if you're doing everything, you're just going to get burnt out, and you'll end up like... You can put your heart and soul into getting the tones right and getting the songwriting right and everything. And then by the time you come to mixing it yourself, you're just completely spent. Well, at least that's the way I'm looking at it, and it's like I can put absolutely every last piece of energy into the writing and the tones, and then hand it off to Ruben, and he can then start fresh, and he can then put all his heart, soul, and energy into the mix, and that'll end up being way better than one person trying to spread himself too thin over the whole thing. And I think that's something I've had to learn.
Yeah, and I think having different ears on a project throughout is very helpful too, because it can help catch little things you just kind of miss as you like burn out on the length of the project or the effort of the project. And I mean, I said before, like, sometimes when people come, like, sometimes when you see producers complain like, oh, the band wants to mix themselves now, and usually my response says, all right, cool, let them. I mean, I think you and I are a great example of, the kind of long-term thing that happens with that. If they're a client you're really going to care about, you're going to care about them because they're very serious and very professional, and, whatever that means, whether they're actually pros or just professional hobbyists, whatever, they have that professional attitude. And generally they're going to reach that point, and either they're going to be a really cool mixing colleague, who knows, you may end up working together as engineers, And I mean, for my part, I started learning to mix so I could mix my own bands. And I realized I liked mixing, and I'm a terrible songwriter or performer, and I'm like, can't do any of that, but I'm really good at mixing. I like mixing. I like doing that kind of stuff. And I'm decent at finishing songs. I'm decent at getting, material and putting in post-production and extra layers and really sprinkling up all that ear candy and stuff. And so I stopped being a musician, became producer and engineer. And you kind of went the other way. You joined URM to become a producer for your record as well, to mix yourself. And you ended up realizing that you're more of a songwriter and more of a performer and more of a guitarist, and that you like doing that part.
More of an engineer.
Yeah, and more of an engineer. You're more about the recording process than you are about the mixing and mastering process. And so you've gone the other way, and you've, where I've decided I'm going to let the other people write the music and do the stuff. You've decided I'm going to record and, write the music. And then I'm going to get this guy, Ruben, who we know, he's really awesome. Get him to do the mixing. And I think that most of the guys who are professional enough are going to reach that point where they realize why people are career at single things and how much of a burnout it is. And even just generally, what they like doing and what they don't. I mean, I got a ton of friends who are like, yeah, I learned to mix my own albums. And I realized I hated mixing. I hate it. And I will always hire a producer or engineer from now on.
Yeah. I think there was kind of a light bulb moment for me a little bit as well in October last year when I had a vocalist come over. She was really, really good vocalist. She came over and it was kind of she just came here almost as a last resort because the studio that they wanted was booked out, and so we set up all the session and everything, but it was very quickly I was able to figure out what her sense of humor was and kind of just keep her happy and keep her laughing, and was able to kind of give her very basic feedback on her takes, which would then exponentially make the next take even better. And I was like, oh, I guess this is a thing I can do. So I should try doing this a bit more. And then I had Liam, a friend of mine, he used to be a member of the previous project we talked about earlier, Bezalel. He came over and he did a guest solo on one of the songs in this album. And again, he'd do a take, and then I'd give him some feedback, and then the next take would be better. And I was like, this is something I need to do. I need to focus on this rather than on the mixing. Because because Ruben and we're kind of working towards this project sort of studio concept where basically I deal with the producing, the songwriting and recording, and he deals with the mixing and the mastering, and with our powers combined we can accomplish anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys, you can plug that as well, of course. That's A to Z,
or A to Z if you're over this side of the pond.
Yep, that's AIIZ, by the way. That's
as in
the Roman numeral too. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So if you want to pronounce as A's, that's also acceptable.
Yeah, so you can look that up. They got a channel where they're doing covers and stuff where they've worked on. Toby will, he'll engineer and produce his own cover of something, and Ruben will do all the mixing and mastering for that. And you can check out a bit of his playing there if this album is not enough for you.
Or you can avoid it if it's too much. But we put a video out every week. We've been doing a few songs from this album. We've been doing some covers. We've got some other original stuff that we're working on. We'll no doubt be putting some Bloody Pineapple stuff on there at some point as well.
Absolutely. That's going to be a lot of fun when we get to that.
Yeah, it is. And when clients come along, we'll potentially help them make a video and put that on the channel and stuff as well.
Yeah. Yeah, or even their own. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think this
album is essentially... Oh, sorry. I was just going to say this album is essentially our first A to Z project that we have done and completed. We could say that I'm the client.
Exactly. In the way that you're the guest on a podcast, you'll usually be hosting.
Yeah, exactly.
Or co-hosting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but it's just like it's good. It's been a good way to work out and iron out the kinks and stuff. Like, for example, not putting the entire album into one zip and sending that across, because that will absolutely annihilate Ruben's computer when he tries to uncompress it.
Oof. Yeah. No, that's a good thing to know, though. That's absolutely a good thing.
It is a good thing to know, yeah.
That's one of those dumb little things you don't think about. Yeah, I got a client right now who's been learning how to export multi-tracks like in a real way for the first time. And I think he's struggling with how Ableton does it. I'm sure there's a faster method, but I don't know it, and he doesn't either. So he's been trying to organize it all and everything, and he keeps like, I'm just working. I was like, no, it's totally good. Just, you get it sorted. I know you're gonna deliver a great file. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you just you kind of have to go through it and know what little things might challenge, So I think for me, learning from that as an engineer, as a mixing engineer, I'm going to have to maybe find a way to put together good videos on how to multi out, how to export multis from whatever DAW you're in.
Yeah.
And I mean, those little details are pretty important for sure.
Definitely. I've never used Ableton, so I have no idea how you would, where you can start with.
I've used like the free version a few times, but I've never had to do any kind of multi-output or anything.
No.
Well, we've been talking about the process a lot, but I say we actually get into the album by track. Actually go through and talk about the creation of each track, starting with this intro, which love the work on this, by the way. This is the one that Ben has worked on, all this like beautiful orchestration, of course.
I think I did show you a version of this. Oh, sorry, go on. Say it again.
I think it headlines the album well.
Lovely, thank you. I think I did because I did originally orchestrate this out myself, and I think I may have sent you a version of that. In fact, I made when Spitfire BBC Discovery first came out. The first thing I did to test it out was run this piece through that because I was just using the stock Logic stuff before. It was actually created originally to be an intro piece for our gig. So when my previous band Bezalel, CPJ was actually a song for Bezalel originally, and I kind of just pinched it for this project. I thought it would be really cool to have that as the opening song, but then I thought it'd be even cooler if we had like an orchestral piece that played first before we actually started performing. So that's what I created this for. And then I was like, actually, this is kind of cool because there's a lot of motifs. The whole thing is basically very, very borrowed from CPJ. It's like you've got the intro riff there, you got the verse riff there, you got the chorus riff there, in a orchestral form. And so then through Bloody Pineapples and URM, I got to know Ben out of Glory Hammer. Had a little fangirl moment when he accepted my friend request, so I hired him to. I basically sent him the MIDI that I made, and he prettied it up and put it through the sample libraries he's got, and it's so much better than it was when I first made it.
Do you know what sample libraries he happened to use?
Not off the top of my head. You know what? I'm gonna have a very quick look in the chat with him and see if he says, because it would be good to know. But he sent out. He asked me if he wanted to mix it, if I wanted him to mix it, or to send stems, and he said he basically stemmed it out for me. It was still a lot of tracks, but he
I can imagine.
he combined a lot of the So he combined a lot of things together to make it easier. I'm just finding the.
I think it came together very, very well. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff, as I love all kinds of music, especially stuff like that. I mean, anything and everything. And of course, I've done a little bit of work like that for Bloody Pineapples and probably have more on the way. So I'm definitely a sucker for that kind of like big orchestral intro that he's got going on. Of course, Ben is very talented. He ended up, the way we had kind of met was through Bloody Pineapples. One of the collab smashes that we did, he ended up joining on for a month that we did not actually finish a track for, unfortunately.
I described that as we defecated the bed.
we definitely shot ourselves in the foot a little bit. But, I mean, we still ended up making that connection, and we've, of course, you've worked with him since. He did all that stuff there, and, we're talking about wanting to bring him on for, a little bit of stuff on the Bloody Pineapples record because he's a joy to work with, and, you got to support your boy.
Yeah, he's doing orchestration lessons now, and he inadvertently, I don't know. He told me a lot about, like, he was messaging me as he was working on it. It's like, you're doing this. This is not how a real orchestra works. A real orchestra would be doing this. I was like, oh, okay, good to know. And he was like, they definitely wouldn't be doing this. So I've changed this, and it's like, okay. And he actually, it's in a slightly different mode as well to the actual song, because the actual song is in Lydian, and some of the note choices are slightly different. But I think that's actually really cool. And when I first heard it, I was like, oh, I don't know if I like this, because it's like these notes are very different. But then it's like, actually, this sounds like an orchestra interpretation, and this is kind of more like the kind of, if you were listening to soundtrack of a movie, it would sound more like this than what I wrote and what the following song is. So, yeah.
And that kind of goes into voicing again, like we were talking about with the drums. I mean, now instead of thinking about like a guy who only has two arms, you have to think about, anywhere between like 30 and 150 people and how they're going to each be playing, how you're going to stack their voices and what the kind of bigger goals are. And trying to play it so you don't need 40 violin players in a 50-piece orchestra.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't find. He's probably said somewhere what he used, but I would assume it's probably something like Spitfire or East West or something.
Yeah, one of the Spitfire, East West, maybe 8DO, something like that. Yeah, I think that I think it'd be interesting to find out if we are able to. But I mean, if we're not, I figured you're not hiring a whole orchestra. I mean, you were just saying earlier you didn't really have the budget even for like a drummer and a bassist. I can't imagine you had the budget for a whole orchestra. That's a whole different monster, of course, even for one track.
I did toy with the idea of there's a local choir that does. You can hire them out for stuff, and I just thought it'd be really cool to hire a choir out and get them to sing some bits, but ultimately, decided against that. I didn't even bother finding out what the price was, but yeah, maybe in the future. But then now I've just got the East West Composer Cloud, and then we're having lots of fun with programming them to say crazy things.
Yeah, I love their Hollywood choir is really, really crazy. I mean, there's not much you can. Not much else out there that you can get that'll compete with a choir that'll actually like sing the lyrics you give to it.
Yeah.
Like Pineapple.
Yeah.
Which was quite a challenge to actually get it to pronounce correctly. I was getting
I can imagine.
Like Pineapple or something like that. Yeah. And so you got that. You got your just nice, huge cinematic intro, and then you start getting into the heavy stuff.
Yeah, so like you've said before, I'm a big fan of Trivium, and it's been quite instrumental, pun intended, on my influence. Yes, and Snowfall, which is the first track on Silence in the Snow, was the brief that I gave Ben when it came to programming the opening track. But yeah, then the next song, CPJ, it's a very sort of personal song to me because in 2016, and this is how I know the age of the song, I lost my granddad and my great uncle within like a month of each other. And this song just fell out of me basically as a response. And it's kind of lyrically it's dealing with loss, and if you're a spiritual or a faith a spiritual person who has faith in the Bible, for example, such as myself, things like that can shake your faith and it can make you doubt your beliefs, and that's what the song is about. Yeah, it's about
sort of the frustration of loss. Way.
It's that loss and the kind of fighting with yourself. Like, you have to remind yourself that of the way things are. Yeah. And the reality that you live in, your perception of that reality gets shaken, and it's just, you kind of have to give yourself a talking to.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And I feel like you can definitely really connect with the emotion in a lot of this album for sure. And I think it definitely comes through. And so would that also make this one of the oldest tracks of all the tracks on the record?
It's between this one and System Slain as the oldest. I know that when I first started making the band Bezalel, I had System Slain and I had CPJ, and I had another couple of songs as well.
Right.
But I can't remember which one came first. I mean, they're all around the same sort of time, so that kind of, yeah. But this one was more complete and finished than System Slain was. I think that one was still in progress.
Okay. So at least if nothing else, probably the earliest completed song.
Yeah. No, it was actually once I finished that song that then inspired me to. It was finishing CPJ was like, I want to get back in a band, and it was that inspired me to start Bezalel.
There you go. So in a way, then it was one of the very pivotal tracks in this whole record.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's gone through a few changes because when I originally wrote it, it was in drop C, and then it went to drop A, and now it's.
You turning down to drop C?
Yeah, tune down all the way down to drop C. So, but then a friend of mine who I still want to do a band with, he's great. He's a great collaborator. We've known each other, like, I think when we first met, he was 3 and I was 6. So we've got a lot of history. Yeah.
Yeah. Real old friend then.
Yeah. So, and we've written a lot of stuff together, and it's been kind of on again, off again about doing a band and stuff. And around this time that I wrote CPJ was around the time I was trying to start a band with him, and that didn't happen. But the drummer who I was,
right.
The 3 of us were trying to. It was me and Craig and Jordan. We were trying to start a band together, and Craig kind of fell off the radar a little on that. He had some other stuff come up, and then but the project carried on with just me and Jordan. Then other people came along later on, but that was
Jordan, by the way, being the drummer that we recorded the Green samples off of.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So that was big. I think it was. I can't remember where I was going with this now. But it went through changes. So it was in drop C, and then I went in drop A, and then I know where I'm at again. Craig taught me about modes because I literally knew nothing about scales or keys, or I was just like, what key is this? Well, I'm in E standard, so therefore it's E minor. Or like this song, I wrote it in drop C, therefore it is C minor. But no, he taught me about modes. And the funny thing is I then sat down and studied CPJ from let me try and figure out what key this is in. And it was in C Lydian. And the funny thing is, like, I'd written, when it came to the first solo in the song, because there's 2 solos, there's the harmonized solo and then there's the stratty solo. The first solo, when I wrote that, I literally had the rhythm guitar on loop, and I sat with my guitar and I mentally I played every single note on the guitar one at a time and made a mental note of which notes worked and which ones didn't. And then I'm like, right, so now I've got a scale that I can build the solo from, and I wrote the solo in that scale, and it was Lydian, which is what the mode of the song is. But I so I was getting really into that and figuring out that, like, if you move the Aeolian or minor, and you basically, it's the same notes, but you start on a different root note, then it's a different mode. And like, it kind of completely blew my mind. So and so I learned because at this point I knew what all the notes were on the guitar fretboard, and I realized that, like, A minor is basically all of the white keys of the piano. So if I just avoid flats and sharps on the fretboard, then I am in A minor or C major, and that became very easy for me to write in A minor. When it came to the CPJ, I was like, I wonder what it would sound like and it's in Lydian, if I changed it to F Lydian, because that would then be in the same, I can't think what the wording is, but it would be A minor, but it would be all the white keys, basically. F Lydian is all the white keys.
The mode of A minor. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I did that and I was like, oh, this sounds really sick. It sounds a lot heavier. And so but then what I did is I had it so that instead of going, because when it was in C, it would be like the verse riff would go from the C and then it would go up to E. So you'd be chugging on the C, and then when you go to the chord change, it would go up to the E. So, but what I did this time, I had it so it went down. So I took the F chugging up an octave. So it's like chugging on the F, and then it goes down to the A. So it's exactly the same chord, but it's just down an octave, and it sounded more different rather than just chugging on the open string of the guitar like you would normally, or I would normally write. It then just added a whole extra dimension to it and made it sound more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other interesting thing with this song is that actually there's a couple of things, but when it was a Bezalel song, Mike couldn't hit any of the high notes and that's one of the reasons why I brought it down. He was struggling to hit the high notes in the verse, and also he was struggling with the rhythm of the vocal melody. So I ended up stripping it right back and simplifying it. So the lyrics are the same, but the melody is way more simple, and I think it's more catchy from that. And then,
and if I'm not
go on, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, if I'm not mistaken, I think you have your wife on this track too?
Yes. So, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what I mean, that came from a different, I was making basically an acoustic kind of country kind of version of this song that we could do together. And she did those parts on there. And when we were tracking that, I was like, while we're here and while we've got the microphone set up, do you want to do those same parts on the heavy version? And she's like, yeah, sure. So then she kind of just built it out a bit more, almost got kind of a Doro kind of quality to her voice in the vocals on this one, which is quite cool. And I really like that. But there's like a bridge part between the second chorus and the first solo. Originally, it went straight from the second chorus into the solo. But when we were practicing it, when it was a Bezalel song, Liam, the other guitarist, we had it so that... I'm trying to remember which way around we had it. I think we had it so that he played a solo first, and then I played that harmony solo. And he forgot that he was supposed to play a solo. He thought he just went to play the rhythm of the of my solo while I played the rhythm of his solo. So we basically had like an empty patch with no solo in. And because at the time, okay, so another weird thing about at that time, we had it so that I was playing in drop A and he was playing in E standard. So he was playing like the A chord on the A string of E standard, but with an extra fifth below it. So, and it kind of had that's just a chord I love, and it just sounds like really, really heavy. And I think it was something that Trivium discovered while recording Crusade, because it's all over Crusade album. And I just think it's a really cool chord. But so basically we had that, but I was then playing like the A note on the bottom string of my drop A guitar, and it just sounds enormous with those two guitars like that. It sounds heavier to have one guy in E standard playing the chords Liam was playing and one guy in drop A playing what I was playing than two guys in drop A, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It just sounded bigger. So
I think a lot of people take for granted the fact that, like mode and key has nothing to do with tuning, really. I mean, beyond just the kind of the character of the notes in the scale and in the chords. But it is perfectly doable and also really cool to actually mix tunings when you're working on tracks.
I think so.
You can do stuff like that.
Yeah. So we just played this, and those chords together weren't already married together in the song. It was just only by accident, and we accidentally played this rhythm part together. And I just had like such a stank face on when we played that, and I was like, and when we finished the song, Liam was like, "I'm really sorry, I forgot to do my solo." I was like, "No, you've just created the best bit of the song."
Yeah, and I think also I can tell just in general from both just kind of the emotional impact of the song, the fact that you're referencing it in other parts of the album and little motifs, and even just the fact that you have it up on A to Z. I think that it's safe to say that's probably what you would consider like the big single or one of the big singles from the record.
Yep. When I first showed this song to my friend Craig, he was like, "This is the most radio-friendly song you've ever written."
I can see that. Yeah. I think that, I guess it depends on what radio station you're listening to. I think maybe if it's BBC Radio 3, the intro is probably more radio friendly, but
yeah, that's very true. Classic FM.
There you go, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and then the other thing. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say about the last.
You, please.
It's okay. Yeah. The last chorus. I'm probably going to talk more about this song than any other song because it's the oldest.
Fair. I think again, just reestablishing the emotional impact and how much it's been through, and kind of the importance of it.
It's gone through more changes than the other songs have, and like I say, it's just a bigger, more important song to me as well. So Yeah, so that's how I'll probably skip over the other songs quicker than I will on just this one. But it's so part of that idea of you've got, your faith is shaken, and then
Mm-hmm.
you look deeper into it, and you're kind of reinforced and reminded and almost strengthened by the whole process.
Right.
That last chorus, the lyrics are flipped on their head. So like the first chorus, "Will I see you again?" The last chorus is, "I will see you again." And then like, what will be your answer when he calls for you? I know how you'll answer when he calls for you. It's just, and it's just kind of that. And I think the mode being Lydian kind of leans itself towards that as well, because it's almost like that halfway house between major and minor. So it has that sort of melancholy of minor, but it's also got that kind of uplifting sound of major, and it kind of almost ambivalence across the whole song, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think
so
that's
played into that.
I think that's one of those things with modes too. A lot of people who use modes understand. I know that a lot of composers will absolutely talk about how, different modes kind of evoke a different kind of emotional response, so like kind of a deeper emotional response. And I feel like you have that similar kind of composer's mindset when you're working on this one.
That's something I've developed in the last couple of years, though, because like when I wrote this song, I didn't know anything about modes. So it was kind of almost like deconstructing this to, why does it have this feeling? Now I understand a bit about modes. Why does it have, it's Lydian. That makes sense as to why it has this feeling. But it was very, very natural and very organic when I actually wrote it.
Yeah. It's kind of one of those things. You don't need music theory to be a great songwriter, even a really complex songwriter. I mean, you can write really cool prog stuff and have no idea how any music theory works because you just know how it feels. It's just kind of prescriptive, as a lot of my friends will put it, a lot of my like, music theory friends. It's one of those, like, it's not about you have to use these tools. It's more about you're writing what works for you, what makes sense to you, what feels good to you.
Yeah.
And then you can deconstruct it and you can put names to the methods.
I think for me, that's it. Like with the writing, it's like I write something and then I'll go back and study it and be like, oh, okay, so it's this, it's this mode. So if I'm using this mode in this part, then if I carry on using that mode, then it'll go into this part. It's not like, I mean, I'm going to contradict this in a bit, and I'm very much a believer in every rule has an exception that proves the rule. But I don't sit down and think, all right, I'm going to write a song in Lydian. It's just like I write a song and then, let's just find out. I'm going to do a guitar solo now, so I need to know what mode it's in for when I actually compose the solo or compose the vocal melody or whatever. So I need to know what mode it's in. But like I say, it's less using theory to write and more writing and then
using
building
theory to
upon
understand
that with the theory.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I can say, having worked with you as a songwriter, that you, like, I don't sit down and talk with you and you just start like one of the Bloody Pineapple songs. You don't ever just sit down like, okay, we're doing this in Lydian, we're doing this in, like Dorian. This is going to be a really awesome Dorian track. Like, I mean, I've rarely ever hear you talk about modes or much music theory. It's something I know, but I mean, it's not like how you approach the songs.
I kind of only scratch the surface on theory as well. I mean, I know enough about the way a staff is constructed to be able to create sheet music or to be able to correctly tab out,
interpret.
Yeah, but I've not had any training or anything on that. Literally, everything I know about tabbing out is from noodling about with Guitar Pro and figuring it out for myself and refusing to read the instruction manual and refusing to learn theory. It's just like brute forcing my way into.
For sure. No, and like I said, that's one way to do it. I mean, at the end of the day, all that really matters is just writing something that works for you and feels good to you. However you get there. We've had, I have another like producer kind of community I hang out, and we've had that argument a few times with people, and there are definitely people who are like kind of on the like music theory is a set important concrete rules, and you have to take it really seriously. And guys are just like, man, just write noise, make noise that sounds cool, and deal with it. I mean, music theory, even in itself, is very kind of just, again, prescriptive. It's just kind of like, this is, we have these modes. That's kind of how we like to work. But I mean, at the end of the day, we could very easily just change to like a 7-Ito system and completely leave behind the 12 equal temperament that we've been using for the last several centuries. I mean, we really could just do whatever we want with it. It's just a kind of description of what we do with it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a song I did with Bezalel called Defenestration, which is actually about Jezebel being thrown out of a window from the Bible. But again, as an accident, I wrote, there's like, it's very, very, very Aeolian kind of like, and I was like, I feel like I'm onto something here, but it's just not quite there. And then when we were playing at band practice, I accidentally played a note in the main riff from the harmonic minor scale rather than from the Aeolian scale, and I was like, "Oh wow, that was what was missing. That was it." But I didn't know. I was like, "That's really cool." And then it was the drummer Jordan. He goes, "That sounds harmonic minor to me," and I'm like, "I think it might be." And then when I got home and looked up, I was like, "Yeah, that's harmonic minor. That's And then I just basically changed the whole song. I just shifted that one note everywhere where it appeared in the rest of the song by one semitone, and it just went from like, oh, this is kind of a generic kind of rock metal-y kind of sounding to, this sounds sinister as heck.
Those little accidentals that can be perfect little flavor sprinkles. Just
happy accidents.
little bit of pepper, season up the track just a little bit.
We can move on to the next song now if you want to.
The next song, of course, I see you have, so www.wave, I see you've kind of, you've turned the file name extension into a top-level domain.
Yeah,
you'll have to figure out what to do when the .wave top-level domain becomes available to us to buy.
I think actually, when I sent the files over to you, I think that some of the song names were abbreviated. So that one is actually called "Walking in a Winter Wasteland."
Aha. Okay. Yes.
Which is a bit of a departure for me because it's very rare for me to actually say the name of the song in the song.
Right. Yeah.
So that one, it does actually have "Walking in a Winter Wasteland" in the chorus, which is really unusual for me.
Yeah. This one feels a lot more kind of thrash, and it feels a lot more in the kind of tradition of like really upfront kind of storytelling music. Like it's very, everything about it feels very kind of deliberate and, forward.
Which is interesting because it was one of my, I'm not very good at being ambiguous and metaphorical with lyrics. And I feel like this is one of my sort of ham-fisted attempts at being metaphorical.
I mean, more in the sense of like the track feels very, what am I thinking? Maybe not thematically direct, but just sort of generally direct, in the way, like, because thrash metal, even when thrash metal is being metaphorical, thrash metal has a very directness to it, like the sound is very direct. The lyrics are very kind of forward in a way.
Yeah, I mean, the lyrics on this there's a talk about winter wasteland, there's talk about explosions, there's talk about nuclear winter, and it's like, oh yeah, this is really obviously about nuclear warfare. But it's actually using nuclear warfare as a metaphor to talk about the attitudes of the sort of declining Western world attitudes of the late 20th century, early 21st century.
Right.
That's what I mean by ham-fisted metaphor.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And that to me definitely feels like a very, very in keeping with the style. I think that You've definitely got a very good thrash song here, but of course, again, going back to very much in your style,
Yeah.
Like you're not going to listen to it and go, "Oh, this is definitely a Megadeth song" or whatever. It is your song for sure.
Yeah.
Which I like about it is like you can have those old sort of traditional vibes, but it doesn't feel like an old traditional song. It just kind of evokes what you enjoy about that, like older kind of thrash styles.
Well, I mean, they weren't using whammy pedals in old school 80s thrash
No.
for sure.
No.
I can't even remember.
Of course, that
where.
solo too.
Yeah, well, that was Ryan who played the solo for me, and that was awesome because I'd been like banging my head against the wall trying to write a solo on this. I was like, and because the thing is, there's a song was one of the, I think it's like the only Bezalel song that's actually been released, is a song called Deborah's Song, and it was very much when I was doing this, I almost wanted to kind of, because Deborah's Song is one of my favorite songs that I wrote for Bezalel, and I almost kind of wanted to recapture some of that, and it was like, I want to do something that's very similar. So a lot of, I mean, the kind of structure of the song is very similar. If you were to listen to them back to back, you'd be like, this is like this is Deborah's Song 2, basically. And I couldn't get. It doesn't help that it's the same chord sequence under the solo. I just couldn't get away from basically doing the same solo again. And I was really struggling. And then I was talking to Ryan in URM, and he was saying about I can't remember how it even came about, but I just basically said, do you want to do a solo on this song? And he was like, yeah, well, are you sure you want me to? And I was like, yeah, because, I'm a bit more kind of boomery when it comes to my playing and stuff. I was like, no, that's what I want. I want something that's like really raunchy and bluesy. And he absolutely nailed that.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I got it, I was like, I asked you to do a solo on this. I didn't ask you to ask Zakk Wylde to do a solo for me.
Exactly. Oh, so, it's a good one, though. I really like that solo. Once again, one of the many great just, friend features throughout.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love hearing kind of where your friends slot in and how they work off of you. That's one of those little, again, flavors,
And
you're peppering it as well.
Because like with Ben doing the orchestral and with Ruben mixing as well, it's like I could do this myself if I brute force my way through, but I could get someone else to do it. And then I'll come back to it in a second. But what Ryan did was like head and shoulders above what I imagined it being when I was going to do it myself. And it's like I had an idea in my head, like this is how I want it to be, and then he just like absolutely like went way beyond that, and it wasn't exactly what I wanted. It was better than what I actually wanted.
Yeah, and that's kind of the important thing too. Like when you get that chance to be inspired by what your guests are doing, that's kind of when you bring people on who can just do things that excite you and get you excited about it, because that's a far better feeling than brute forcing your way through your own solo. It goes again back to that burnout thing we were talking about earlier. Yeah. Now, Fat Cat, the next song, is actually one of the ones I remember you showing me in the past and talking about.
Yeah, actually, you know what? This actually, no, I was going to say this might be the older song, but it's not, because there's like a precursor to this. Basically, there was one day when I think I was like off sick from work because I had a cold or something. And I had the house to myself for a day, and I'm like, I should do a bit of guitar. I haven't done any guitar in a while. And I thought, I'm going to write a song and record it in one day. And I did. And that song was called Love Me Tender. No, Love My Tender. It was supposed to be like, play on the Elvis thing. But it's like, and it was like, okay, so I'm going to write some lyrics. I'm going to write lyrics. What frustrates me? Money. Money frustrates me. So I'm going to write a song about money. And that's why it was then Love My Tender, because it's a play on words. And it was it was like super rough. I think I might have like plugged the preamp. I think I'm going to plug the effects loop of my Valve State directly into the interface and recorded the guitars that way or something. And then put like an old Red Wires impulse response, or like a System of a Down impulse response or something on it.
Like from way back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah. And then did like a Surge rip off on the vocals, and it was that. And then when we were going through the sort of transition period of going from Bezalel to Wraak. There's a song called "The Fat King," which I recently did a video on A to Z channel. And I was like, I want to kind of meld that song into this "Love My Tender" song, and that's where the Fat Cat came from. But then, like the verse riff, it was like when Mike was singing, he's like, I don't know when to come in, and I don't know when I'm supposed to loop the vocals and all this. And I was like, oh, maybe I just need to add something extra in just to kind of show where the end of the riff is, because it was just literally the dun 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 dun, and it was like it was that over and over and over again. And I was like, oh, I don't even know, I can't even count how many loops of this I'm doing anymore. I'm losing my brain. And then I was like, Jordan was showing me "Bleed" by Meshuggah, and I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rip off "Bleed." I'm just going to have that that bend in it at the end of the riff. There we go, done. So yeah, and this is a strange one because it's like you've got that very obviously ripping off "Bleed" riff, but then like the vocals are kind of very System of a Down rip off, and then there's like, I don't know, the chorus is kind of like almost like a Bullet for My Valentine metalcore kind of thing. It's just a weird thing. It's just weird.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can tell there's even a couple riffs that feel pretty System of a Down. There's like early System of a Down, like, we're talking self-titled and stuff like 98 and stuff too.
It's true.
In this one, that was one of the things that struck me about it when I was listening through the other day. It's like da 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 da. I can hear Darren coming in and one of his like unhinged screaming fits right after that or something.
So
but of course, it doesn't do that. It actually drops into that kind of like melodic chorus.
So that was that particular riff was absolutely knocking. I was banging my head against the wall for ages because it is. Oh yeah, again, if we go back to modes, I think that when that dirt riff comes in, it's in Phrygian, but then the chorus is in Aeolian, and it was like really jarring to go from one to the other. And I was like, what am I going to do? So then it just literally just plays the riff, and then halfway through the riff, it goes from Phrygian to Aeolian. It's exactly the same riff, but it just like moves that second note up a semitone. And then it's in the right key to go, a right mode to go into the chorus. But if I did that mode for the whole of that riff, it sounded almost happy. So that was a whole process trying to figure it out, and it was just like the most stupidly simple solution in the end, just moving the riff up one fret for half of the riff. And it's like, and when I listen to it, it kind of almost sounds really awkward to me. It's like, this is so stupid and dumb, but I think it does work in the grand scheme of things.
It is about those little details in the end too.
Yeah.
And then of course from there we move on to Altered State, which is my favorite Tesseract album. So though this is no way like Tesseract.
It's nothing like Tesseract. And lyrically, it's inspired by the first law of thermodynamics, which is the same thing that inspired the lyrics for the album Altered State. So that's where the link is. It is very totally much named. It is absolutely named after that Tesseract album. Because, like I said,
it's a great album.
Based on the same thing. Yeah. One of my favorite albums of all time.
Yeah, same. Absolutely. I love that album. There's so much nostalgia, and it's also just a great record.
That album came out, I think 2 days after I saw Tesseract live, playing some of the songs off that album. So that's quite cool.
Oh man, there you go.
Yeah,
that's gotta have been really cool.
A whole extra story to that. Oh yeah, actually, I'm gonna mention that now as well.
Go for it.
That gig is how I discovered the algorithm, because the algorithm was the support for Tesseract, and I think I was like 2 weeks before the gig. 2 weeks before the gig, I was like, I'm going to see who the support is. Oh, it's the algorithm. Listen to them. Okay, I'm more excited to see the algorithm than I am Tesseract now. But the cool thing is that when algorithm played, they had Mike Mallion from Monuments playing drums. And I had a call with Mike Mallion, give me some drum lessons on programming, which we were specifically looking at Walking in a Winter Wasteland, and he gave me tons of advice, particularly on the hi-hats and stuff. But he was like, "Oh yeah, so I've been doing this technique with hi-hats ever since I used to do this. I used to play with this artist, small little sort of like synthy kind of artist called The Algorithm." I was like, yeah, I know the Algorithm. Oh, you've heard of them? It's like, yeah, I saw you play with them. He's like, no.
Algorithm is fantastic. If you're not listening to The Algorithm, you should.
You should.
They're awesome. That's another one of the ones that Toby and I share as an influence quite a bit.
The last time I recommended someone listen to The Algorithm, their response was, never show me that kind of music ever again.
And that's why you show it to them again.
Yeah. So next time I'll show them Eiger or the Dali Thundering Concept or something like that. But yeah, Altered State. So this is... Okay, so when it comes to the writing process, I think I talked about a couple of processes, and I think I may have glossed over one, which is basically when I discover a new band, I just sit down with the guitar and immediately the new song just pops out of me, which is inspired by hearing this band for the first time. And it wasn't the first time I'd heard this band because... how can you go through life without listening to Killswitch Engage? But it was when I was going to see Killswitch Engage in 2016 and Bullet for My Valentine, and I thought, you know what, I should probably listen to a little bit more Killswitch before we go, because I've only really heard End of Heartache. And I listened to Alive or Just Breathing on the way home from work, and then picked up the guitar and wrote this song. But what is interesting with this one is that the middle riff, it was completely different. It was a completely different riff. But when we recorded the drums, because originally we had actual drums recorded on this, but the drums that were recorded were absolutely sick, but they didn't fit the riff at all. So I thought we can either ditch the drums and have something more vanilla and keep with this vanilla riff, or I can do something different. And again, I was banging my head against the wall on that. But I had a Zoom call with a Skype call with, not that it matters, Skype call with John Brown from Monuments, and I showed him the song.
Monuments really helping out to write on this one.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, I hadn't really listened to Monuments before. I've only literally got into Monuments like this year.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, so, man.
That's
such a good band, though.
Yeah, very good. But so it was through Riff Hard. I had a one-on-one call with John Brown, and I showed him this song, and I was like, right. So you hear how awesome the drums are in the middle bit, and how crap the guitar riff is now with those drums. And he's like, yeah. And he literally just he was just like sitting there noodling with his guitar, and he's like, I think I've got something. And then he's like, but I've got to go now. And so the call went, and then he later on sent me a video clip of him playing a riff over those drums.
I remember this. And, I remember you telling me about that.
I was like, oh, look at this is so cool. I've still got that. I was actually, because I'm actually dropping a video for Altered State over on A to Z tomorrow, and I was thinking about putting that footage of John Brown in there playing that riff.
You probably want to talk to him about that first, but
yeah, exactly. I just thought, no, I'm not going to. But so shout out John Brown because he's awesome.
Yeah,
but yeah,
John's awesome.
I think I changed what he sent over, like just literally a couple of notes, possibly. But yeah, so that was like something I would never have come up with. It's really cool, and I think it's an awesome riff. So I think that really fits. And so when it came to programming the drums instead, and again, this is partly the whole. I keep improving. Oh no! Now that my guitar recording has improved, now the drums sound terrible because I had no idea what I was doing when I recorded these drums. So let's just program them. But I wanted to retain that performance, so I spent a lot of time trying to get the drum programming of that middle part to be as close to the original performance as possible.
Yeah,
a lot of this, particularly the velocity matching on the toms and stuff. That was a whole process. But yeah, that was good fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the first bit of me screaming on the album as well.
And then after that, we have Sorry, and then after that we have System Slain, which for the System of Down influences, this is not the System-y influence compared to just 2 songs ago as much, but
so this is a Testament ripoff. That's pretty much it. It's so much like when I actually first had the riff out, I was like, I've got to go listen to Over the Wall by Testament because I just got to make sure it's not actually note identical.
Thankfully, make sure it's not. No, mine's different. It goes da 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 da.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's basically the way that this song started out. But the interesting thing is that this song again, lyrically, it's gone through quite a few changes. The original lyrics I wrote for this song are actually now the lyrics for Disassociative. So which is interesting. But then this song was at one point called Slain Enrage.
Interesting.
And basically, the lyrics for the song at the time, I was like, "Oh, we need to do lyrics for the what became Slain Enrage for Bloody Pineapples." I'll just send the lyrics to my song Slain. Yeah. So I literally just sent the lyrics I had for this song over to Jay, and then he changed them to what is the Bloody Pineapples Slain Enrage. So then I was like, well, I could just use the same lyrics that I had written because Jay's changed them now for that. And some of the bits that Jay changed, the original parts are actually in this song now. But yeah, I wanted to call this song System of a Thing. But I was talked into changing it to System Slain. So it's kind of like that System of a Thing crossed with Slain Enrage, which was originally called. But that's why it's called System Slain. And again, the System Slain is not mentioned in the song. So that's just part of my thing. I don't think the Fat Cat is mentioned in the Fat Cat. There is the word fat, but then maybe the word cat. But anyway. So that's
2 separate entities, not related to each other.
Yeah, exactly. But this is a weird song. This is a weird song because it's like Testament ripoff, screaminess, and then it's got like the the chorus is almost like barbershop with like blast beats. And then you've got like the carnival breakdown riff and with a Wilhelm scream, and then you've got an 8-part solo battle, and then a drum, and then a little drum solo, and then a bass solo, and then it all comes back. It's like, what the hell is this?
It's just all over. And then of course you got Luke screaming on this one in places too, I think, right?
Yeah. Luke's on this one. He did a great job on this one. But yeah, like
he appears on a few of these.
Yeah, he's on this song and The Despoiler and Walking in a Winter Wasteland, and there's another one he's on as well, and I can't off the top of my head think what it is.
I think he might have been on Fat Cat off the top of my head. Possibly?
No, he wasn't on that one.
Okay.
It will come back to me.
Yeah.
We'll get to
it, or
again,
you'll remember.
This one was written in drop C, and then I changed it to E standard, and then I changed it to drop E.
So this one's been around a little bit. I mean, there's a lot going on in it too, so it makes sense that it would kind of get reworked a little bit from here to there to there. I really I like the progression of this one. I like the kind of journey it takes you on for sure.
Yeah. Oh, and another interesting thing with this one is that it was edited by Matt Adair. He actually edited the guitars on a handful of songs on this album. But yeah,
another one of our URM buddies.
He is, yeah. He after he edited it, he sent it back to me. He's like, "This feels a little bit riff salad." And I was like, "Yeah. When you hear the guitar solos, you'll understand." He's like, "Oh, okay." Because like each guitar solo has got a different rhythm underneath it. So if you listen to it without the solos, it does sound like, what on earth is going on here? You got this riff, and then you've got this riff, and then you've got this riff, and then you've got this riff. It makes no sense. The thing with this it doesn't make much sense anyway. But the thing with the solos, I just thought I really liked Hangar 18, and there's a whole bit where it's almost like a guitar solo battle between Dave and Marty. And I kind of wanted to invoke that with this song. And when I wrote this song, it was supposed to be 2 guitarists in the band. So it wasn't supposed to be like a a solo battle with one person. Solo battle with one contender.
It definitely sounds like it's written for multiple people to be doing it.
So I thought, well, how can I differentiate, rather than just me shredding for ages, how can I differentiate it? And I kind of just like, okay, so this first solo is supposed to sound like Sinister Gates. This second one's supposed to sound like Marty Friedman. This third one's supposed to sound like Dave Gilmour. This fourth one's supposed to sound like Jeff Loomis, etc., etc. And I think it'd be interesting to see if anyone picks up on who each one is supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that one's a fun journey. I really enjoyed that one.
Oh, I was just going to say, you know, we got a Carnival Breakdown. That's the System of a Down influence coming in there. The Carnival Breakdown 100%. With a Wilhelm scream, you know.
And the Wilhelm was another one I was going to bring up real quick. You have a thing. A lot of guys like to have their own little kind of signature thing they just do for fun. And yours is the Wilhelm. And if you listen to... Actually, ironically... Slain Enrage is the Wilhelm on the Bloody Pineapples one too. So Slain so far seems to be So there's the Wilhelm on both of yours, and I think if I am not mistaken, I think that the Wilhelm thing is because you're big fan of Star Wars, and that's kind of their thing. Every Star Wars movie has to have the Wilhelm. So I feel like that's translated into your work, that all your music also has to have a Wilhelm.
Yeah. So when you were listening to this, were you listening out for where the Wilhelm was going to be?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, man. Yeah, no, I noticed it very clearly when I listened to it the first time. I'm like, there it is. I see what you did there.
But you knew it was going to be in there somewhere, didn't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I know to listen to that for anytime I listen to your records and stuff now. I know to listen for the Wilhelm, and I'm very excited to see where you sneak it into the Bloody Pineapples one, the album later. Yeah,
I'm actually thinking about maybe like doing some kind of weird sound design with it, like making a synth out of a Wilhelm would be
make
really
it funky. Funny. Well, you let me know. I can definitely mess with it. We were doing some sound design for the song we were writing this week, so
nice.
A lot of vocal stuff. I figured out how to do a record scratch without a record player.
Yeah, you showed me that. That was really cool. I'll be looking forward to hearing that.
So we got the next song here, which I assume has a longer title than the one you've given me, because right now the title I have is or something like that.
CBATBH.
Yeah.
That is the actual name of it. It is CBATBH.
Okay, that is actually the...
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was meant to be like a... once again shortened down for the working title of the track.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the funny thing is with that, it was like, I didn't know what to call this song, and it's like, this song's about laziness, and I can't be bothered. I can't be asked. You keyboard mashed. It's like, oh, there we go. I can't be asked, to be honest. So there we go. That's the song, and I can't even be bothered to spell it out. So I will just.
You couldn't be asked to spell it. I couldn't be asked. Yeah.
So.
And I remember you saying
for
this
me what
one,
it stands for.
I remember you saying for this one that you had only dual tracked the guitars, as well as you were kind of going for that, like in that kind of emotional storytelling in the music. You know, like, I'm going to be lazier with the production of it a little bit, just to kind of like, you know, again, represent the idea of the track.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got Jesse Cannon to thank for that, because his book Processing Creativity has absolutely changed my life when it comes to that kind of songwriting, because he's all about how can you instill the emotional intent of a song into the song with not only the writing but the production as well. Like, I mean, a real simple thing to explain it is he says, if you've got a song about loneliness, don't have harmonies. If you've got a song about claustrophobia, don't use reverb. And it's like, that's such a, like, that just, when he said that in his book, it just blew my mind. I was like, oh man, think about all the things they could do to try and make something sound more emotional, more emotionally correct. Like, and with this album, what I did with the guitar tones is I basically used a bass tone for the whole, not bass, a B-A-S-E bass, bass tone for the whole album, which is, Precision Drive into my 5153 into GGD oversized Cali, and that is across every single song.
Combo.
Oh, it's so good. And that goes across the whole album. But then each song has its own additional flavor tone to give it that unique sound for that specific song, which then helps to enhance the emotional intent of that song specifically. But that one tone across the whole album gives you the consistency across the whole album. So on this one, I didn't bother with a flavor tone because I can't be bothered.
Can't be asked.
So that's all part of the thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, the editing on the guitars, I was a lot more lazy with the editing. Again, intentionally, I wanted the guitar to sound a bit more loose, particularly during that alternate picking bit. With the other songs, I would actually go in and edit every single note individually. That I was just like, I'll just edit the first note of each bar to be in time, and the rest of the bar will just be loose.
The song does sound pretty tight for a song you couldn't be asked.
Yeah, it's true. That is true. It's finding that balance, because on the one hand, I wanted it to have that sort of looseness, but on the other hand, I didn't want people to think, "Oh, what happened to this song?" There's absolutely this song sounds horrendous. I'm going to skip it. So you got to find that balance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you could just have fun with it, but no, that definitely makes sense. And then, of course, we move on to Equestrian Lightning, which I got to say, that is definitely a racehorse name. Like, that is that's something I'd be placing bets on. I don't know how well Equestrian Lightning is doing at the Kentucky Derby, but
see, if I tell you the story behind the name of this song, you'll probably like instantly go, "Oh, of course." The intro riff to the song, which I then, there's a kind of 8-bit version of it to start with as well. But that intro riff is very, very, very ripped off / inspired by Thunder Horse by Death Clock.
There you go.
When I come up with a new song or a new riff, I will give it a code name, which will help me to remember it. So it won't be like Riff 1 or like Thrash 1.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to do that, but I will actually give it a name. Like I have a song where the intro sounds like Ginger, and it kind of has some Fit for an Autopsy influence and some kind of Mastodon influence, which is like, you wouldn't put those three into one song, and it does sound, it is not coherent. It needs work. But at the moment, it's called Ginger Elephant Operation. And I know I
look forward to it.
Ginger Autopsy, Mastodon, Ginger Elephant Operation, and so I will know. I won't have to like, let me just open this up and remind myself how it sounds. It's like, no, I remember this one because it's the one that sounds like Ginger.
Yeah.
So this one is like Equestrian Lightning, and this is the one that sounds like Thunder Horse. But the intro. That intro riff, that's the Thunder Horse riff, and that's been around ages. But I just thought, right, I need to flesh this out into a song, and it ended up being kind of almost a Rise Against Bad Religion, Pennywise kind of inspiration on this. Which is funny because you've got like Death Clock intro riff into a punk song into Trivium Breakdown.
Of course, naturally. I mean, again, you just got to let those influences do their thing.
Yeah. And this is another cool thing with the URM, because I got a whole bunch of people from URM to do gang vocals for me, which was good.
There you go.
Yeah, and the 8-bit thing, to go back to what you were saying about the emotional, it's songwriting, storytelling thing.
Yeah.
The song is about addiction, and that's where I got the Equestrian Lightning in, because it's there's talk about gambling, like addiction to gambling, and then I was thinking also like gaming is an addiction as well. So therefore, we've got 8-bit sounds in it.
Which I like as well. The 8-bit, very different from Thunder Horse. You don't have that influence in there anywhere. That was more like Horse the band, or even the Algorithm. Like
it was actually an Ailstorm thing, because there's a couple of songs where Ailstorm do like an 8-bit intro, and then it comes in the actual. It's the same notes on the And I used
little motif,
Super Audio. Have you heard of Super Audio Cart?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they've got like the free version, which is Super Audio Boy, which is just the Game Boy, and that's what I used for that.
Nice.
Which is cool. That was good fun. And the other thing as well, to kind of add to the addiction kind of thing, is that what I was talking about, the guitar tones, where there's one tone across the whole album and then slightly different tones in each song. I did the same thing with the drums, where there's like the same kick and the same snare across the whole album, but then there's additional samples that are different for each song. And one of the things I've got across the whole album is the True North Audio Keg one shot. On the snare on every single song, but this song has it the loudest, and it's like, well, alcohol can be an addiction.
Yeah,
the keg is an alcohol receptacle, so if we have that a little bit louder, that kind of adds that kind of addiction kind of sound thing.
And I remember that's another one. I remember you telling me the other day, you were listening to the mix that Ruben had given you, and it's this like weird frequency going on. I don't know. And then you realized it was the keg.
Yeah,
that keg was kind of that like weird frequency, and you decided to kind of leave it up because it does add to that kind of the emotional storytelling of the song.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's that little irritating bug, like I think, a lot of people with addiction talk about that kind of like that need, that kind of itch. And in a way it can kind of represent that idea too. It can be that like just subtle underlying itch, that kind of bug in your ear.
Yeah, I actually had to do a lot of research on rehab and addiction and stuff to be able to write the lyrics for this song, because not a subject I'm particularly versed in myself, but it's kind of more because not like a frustration or something I've had to go through, thankfully, but it's something I've seen other people go through, and it's kind of like a frustration.
And the same for me. I've been close to a lot of other people who've been through the battle of addiction, who have won it and lost it and still struggle with it even now, and luckily it's not something I've had to struggle with, but I definitely understand like trying to write about that.
Yeah. So that's where that comes from. And that's like the breakdown middle bit was absolute Trivium ripoff.
There's 100%. A lot of, and it's fantastic, and I love it.
Well, thank you. There's a lot of bits where it's like, well, almost all the Trivium ripoff bits are from Shogun as well, specifically. It's like that dun 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 dun. It's like it's very similar to a part in He Who Spawned the Furies by Trivium.
Yeah,
but, I'm not too. I have no shame, basically.
I will say though that the intro riff to the Despoiler, the next track, actually feels sort of System of a Down to me as well.
Really?
Yeah, like I can see that being like System of a Down circa like Steal This Album, like that kind of fast, rapid picking, and then I could see like Serge coming in doing his kind of like speed kind of rap thing on it, or even just Darren doing like his kind of like jumpy, bouncy, screamy thing. But of course it's, I bring that up because while it sounds like it's got that influence to me, to my ear as a fan of System of a Down, I know you are a System of a Down fan, I'm going to guess right away that was not what inspired it. That's a circumstance. That's what happened, but I'm going to guess that was not the inspiration.
Yeah, so I mentioned before about my friend Craig talking to me about modes. So he talked to me about the Locrian mode, and he was like, "We don't talk about the Locrian mode. That's that's like was it on Lion King where it's like that's as far as our kingdom goes. Beyond that, that's nothing to do with us." And it's like,
what's that shadowy bit over there? Well, now it's in Kanto. Now, you don't talk about Locrian. No.
So he was like, Locrian's horrible. You can't possibly write a Locrian song. And I was like, and I took that personally.
I'm offended for Locrian.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm going to write a song in Locrian. And also around that time, I discovered a little small folk band from Canada called Archspire. So yeah, basically I was like, I'm going to write an Archspire song in Locrian, and that's what this song is.
Love it.
And it was funny because I remember showing this song to Craig, and he was like, "This is not a Toby riff." And then the verse comes, and he goes, "Oh, no, that's a Toby riff." There we go.
I can definitely hear the Archspire influence. Of course, you don't have like the speed rap screaming anywhere in it. Which
no,
I mean, I can't blame you. That is a really, 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 really hard thing to do, and I don't off the top of my head, I don't think any of our friends can do that.
No, it's interesting because Ollie from Archspire actually advertised that he was doing features for songs. And I was like, oh, I'm going to get him to do a feature on this song because that'd be so cool. And I was like, just get him to do one in the intro. And then I heard his prices and like, nope, I don't think I will.
Look, I really want to.
Yeah,
but I am a little too broke.
Yeah, I'm not saying that he's overpriced or anything like that. I'm just saying I don't have it.
Again, we went over. He couldn't even afford a drummer, and we have drummer friends.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah. I think the thing for me that really gives away the Archspire influence and the spoiler is probably the drums, specifically like that snare drum. The way you program that snare drum to me, that's kind of the Yeah, I think that's kind of the giveaway for me. Like, I mean, the riff for sure too, but the way, like, there's something about that specific kind of style of blast that really feels very Archspire to me. And even the sample chosen has that kind of, that like tight pingy sound, which of course I know you're a big fan of anyway. That's another thing. Knowing each other is that I know that you're a fan of the like really bright ringy snares.
In the right context, yeah. I think, I mean, like, I wouldn't put that kind of snare in like the Black Album. I think the Black Album snare is one of the greatest snares of all time. But yeah, this
you wouldn't replace the Black Album with Saint Anger.
No, because the St. Anger snare, like, I think the St. Anger snare works on St. Anger. I don't think it would work anywhere else. And I just think, people need to take into consideration that for the moment in time, for the emotional intent, it was perfect. It sounds trashy. Yeah, it sounds awful, but it works, and that's what matters.
I think the problem is that it's just a bit too loud. I think if it were turned down a little bit more, it would have probably glued a little better.
It's too loud.
But yeah, I mean, that was also like the new metal. That was like the height of the new metal vibe, and new metal was huge on the ping snare. That just like bright, ringy. I mean, I think the other time that got really popular was like that 2008 deathcore vibe, when all the snares sounded like that, like rubber dodgeball bouncing on the gym floor all the time.
That's funny because what you're talking about there, that's what I was hearing in Equestrian Lightning, where I was like, what is that? It kind of has that sort of weird basketball kind of
that 2008
sound. Yeah. But that was the gig. So but the funny thing is, like, if you watch a TV show and there's like one episode where like there's this like really cool special effect, and you're like, oh, that feels like, but the rest of the series is like not as good. It's almost like, oh, they blew all of the CGI budget for the whole season on this one episode. I feel like this song is like they blew the drum programming budget on this one song because I am very proud of how the drum programming came out on this one, and particularly because someone said to me. Someone's who listened to it was surprised that it wasn't a real drummer. So that mean that in itself, that is like the best compliment someone can give.
That's a good feeling. Yeah,
yeah. And I listened to a lot of real drums to kind of get inspiration. So but it's the snare blast beat.
That's where it really came to a head. That's where that's where all that lesson in like programming drums and proving that you could like think like a drummer. That's where you proved that you were thinking like a drummer and able to write those voices.
I think it was I did this one last. I think it might have been it, because I think I knew that this one was going to be the hardest, and I thought I can basically think of all the other songs as the practice for getting this one right.
So in a way, it had the accumulation of all the things you had learned up until that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. And there's a lot of Luke did a great job on this one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving on to Disassociative, this is actually one of the songs where you get to scream.
Yeah.
You get to hear a bit of you in here for sure. Yeah. Another good, just heavy in your face track.
So this song was basically, I said about like when I hear a band for the first time and then something just drops out. This was the direct result of me listening to Revocation for the first time.
Man, Revocation's a fun one. I've got a history with them, which we can get into in another podcast.
Yeah, definitely got to talk about that at some point. But I don't think it necessarily sounds particularly like Revocation, actually. But that's just where it came from.
It's just this is what happened when you heard it.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, there was someone I know did something very self-destructive, but also very destructive to their family and things. They basically did something very stupid, and it wasn't just like, oh, they made a mistake. They did something very intentionally stupid, and I was like, oh, this is the worst thing in the world. And it just made me. I listened to this song. I was like, I'm going to put some vocals on this song. And it was just like, just absolute like, I'm really angry about this. And I pulled up the lyrics that was originally for the System Slain song and just pressed record, and I did this whole song in one take.
I also noticed you got the pig squeals going on too, which is definitely, it's the only place it shows up, but man, that brings me back. Yeah.
That was, I think that might have been a second take, the pig squeal, but it was. The funny thing is, like, when it came to recording this song, I was listening to the demo with these vocals on, and I was like, I don't think I can recreate this. I'm just going to put these vocals from this really, really rough. I think I recorded the vocals on PD Mic 78 as well.
Oh wow!
So it's like super rough, and I had absolutely no technique, and I was just angry and had a microphone and just And
but then again, it actually, you know what? It plays into that emotion.
Exactly. I thought there's no way I'm going to capture that same emotion if I redo it. So I just literally just pulled up the old session and put them in.
There you go. And you know what? It worked. You definitely get that across.
I think it does the job. So there's no double tracking or anything on any of the vocals on this one because it was literally just one take.
Yeah, and just all the way through.
Yeah. And it was just pulling the lyrics out, and like as I'm screaming one line, I'm like, which line of this lyrics am I going to do next? Because it wasn't in linear order of what I had them written. It was just literally just pulling words out of
throwing it down. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Getting it out. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then that leads us finally to Fine, the final track.
I didn't even pick up on that. Man, I did. That's like proper that's a proper dad joke pun that I didn't even. That's the
dad influence. That's the part where we can tell that you have a child now.
I'm such a dad that I didn't even realize I was doing a dad joke. No, have you seen the Mark Wahlberg Italian Job?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So there's a bit in there where they're saying, "How are you? I'm fine." You know what FINE stands for? Freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. And that inspired the lyrics for this song.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, there's me screaming that in the pre-chorus. The freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. And it was when I first wrote this song. So the writing of this song is interesting because. If you listen to it, you probably think, the first riff, because it's like I said before, I come up with a riff, then I come up with another riff, and then I come up with another riff, and it just flows out.
Right.
But the first riff I wrote was actually the pre-chorus of this song. And that was
usually not a first riff you get.
No, so it's like that the riff was the first one that I wrote, and that was actually. I was listening to Rivers of Nile, and there was a riff in The Home. I was like, oh, that's really cool. I need to make my own version of that riff. And that's what that is. And it doesn't actually sound that much like the one that I was inspired by. I was going to say,
there's not a lot of Rivers of Nile vibes in this track,
not
for
at all.
sure.
No, not at all. And I say, I was like, when I wrote this riff, I was like, that's not at all what I wanted the riff to come out like. And then I was like, oh, but if I could play this afterwards, and I was like, and then the chorus came out, and then I had the lead guitar part in the so I wrote the lead guitar part in the chorus, and I was like, oh no, this is like an absolute rip off of He Who Spawned the Furies by Trivium. This is exactly the same song pretty much. I need to do something to make a difference. I was like, instead of bending up I'll just like use a whammy bar and bend down. There we go. It's completely different now. I'm bending down instead of up. But then when it came to actually recording it, I don't know what possessed me, but I used a slide guitar. I used a slide on the guitar instead. And I was like, oh, this sounds like country western music now.
Again, very strange thing to blend with something that came from the idea of Rivers of Nile.
Yeah.
But again, a great example of just letting your influences bleed.
Yeah. Well, Shogun was recorded in Nashville, so there's that.
That is true.
But yeah, and when I remember showing this song to Jordan, that verse riff to Jordan, and he was like head banging along to the and then it was like it has like the next the second chord is like the minor chord, but then the next chord is the major chord, and like Jordan had this proper like head tilt, like what? Like, that wasn't the chord I expected. And I was like, oh, that's cool. It kind of has this, like, is it happy, is it sad kind of vibe. And I was like, oh, maybe I should go with that sort of direction of the lyrics then. Have it, is it happy, is it sad kind of.
Yeah.
When you're, like, someone's depressed, but they put it on a brave face kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then, like, the drums is, like, 3/4. And it's like, so I had the drums, like, very 3/4. But then when we played at rehearsal, like I had like the doom, like a waltz kind of thing on the drums that I programmed, and he just went doom, and it was almost like this kind of caveman, like I know this is 3/4, I'm playing 4/4, and I don't care. And it was like this actually has this like really weird groove to it that I kind of like now, and so that's where those drums came from in the verse, and again it's like. I don't know whether that was a conscious decision that he made or whether it was like an accidental thing or what, but it was like, oh man, and it's that kind of collaborative thing, isn't it? Like you write something, you think, this is really cool, and then someone comes in and does something completely different to what you want them to do, and it actually adds to it.
Just changes your perspective. It gives you a whole different idea. We'll refer to that as the caveman waltz.
Yeah, caveman waltz. Ugh. And then, so here's an interesting thing that the weird, like chuggy, progressive-y thing after the second chorus was actually originally in the Despoiler.
Oh, interesting.
That was originally the outro for the Despoiler.
I think it works pretty well in this track.
I think,
I assume you'd agree, considering you did change it, but
yeah. Well, I took it out of the Despoiler and put that instead. And I was like, okay, this is kind of that weird groovy thing. Yeah, I think, and it was one of those things where it's like, this is absolute riff salad. Should I take it out? Should I replace it with something else? And I just couldn't make my mind up. And then in the end, I was like, actually, this is kind of like. If you're having a mental breakdown, everything goes all chaotic and your brain is just everywhere. If you're having a panic attack or whatever, then you just like your brain is just racing through so many different ideas, and it just you can't focus. Yeah. And that was kind of then I thought, actually, you know what, that kind of adds to that. And I'm just gonna go even more with the drums because like in that bit, it does like 3 bars of drumming and then 1 bar of fill, and then no fill repeats in that whole section. So I just tried to make it like really chaotic.
Yeah. And then of course again you got that shreddy guitar solo.
Oh yeah. So this is another example of asking someone to do something for you and then just absolutely surpassing the expectation. So I said to my friend Liam, I was like, I want to do this guitar. Is there any chance you can come over and just hang out for a bit, and while you're here, record this guitar solo for me? And so he hadn't actually heard it before. I don't think he'd heard it before coming over. I think we literally just showed him there and then. I was like, half the solo is in Aeolian and half of it is in Phrygian. So it kind of has that. What I wanted was like halfway through the solo, it changes mode on the rhythm, and I wanted it to really like the solo go in a completely different direction with that change of mode. And absolutely, like there's that. It has like a and it's like, oh, where's this going now? And that's where it goes from Aeolian to Phrygian. And he absolutely nailed that.
Yeah.
That was great fun because I was recording. We were doing loop recording, and he was like, "Is this how they actually record?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." He goes, "So like, don't have to record the solo all in one go." No, you don't. He goes, "And you can like comp between the different bits and like basically make a really cool solo out of the best bits of each take." I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh man, no wonder you love recording so much. This is so much fun."
That's what it's about, though. That's just having that chance to kind of, have fun with one of your buddies and get to just kind of chill and jam.
Yeah, exactly. What's really cool though is like when we used to play together, he is very much, or at the time, he was very much a bedroom guitarist. He'd never really played with anyone else.
Yeah.
And like he'd come to band practice and he'd play his parts perfectly, but they'd be perfectly out of time. Like he'd like nail every single note, and it would just be like half a bar out from everyone else or something. And he just he'd never played to a click before or anything, and
yeah,
and it was really hard going. And he hasn't got the down picking speed required to play a lot of the riffs that we were writing, but he then he would turn up to band practice with the tabs printed out and put them on a sheet music stand, and would actually like, I want to make sure I'm doing this 100% right. And he would like put a lot of effort into trying to get everything right. And he ultimately ended up leaving the band because he got married. And then, when you first get married, you don't have any time to actually do guitar. That happened to me when I first got married.
Yeah, it makes sense.
That's just a normal thing. But then I thought, I'm going to get him to come around and do this solo, and it doesn't matter if it's out of time, I'll just edit it and stuff. But in the meantime, he'd been having lessons online with someone on Skype, and he'd been practicing every day with a metronome. He was saying to me he'd spend like an hour every morning playing to a metronome, because of when he was in the band with us. He was like, "Oh man, I thought I was good." Kind of. I mean, I'm not saying I'm better, not at all. I'm not. He's definitely better than me. He's definitely better than me, but he just hadn't got that working in a band and being in time with other people thing down. And because that was his big weakness, he was like, I need to fix that. And so, he said he'd been coincidentally been listening to the Riff Hard podcast and the URM podcast and getting tips and ideas and stuff from that. And he, it's funny because he's a big Joel Wanasek fan, but didn't know that Joel was a producer. He just knew him as a guitarist. So there's like this whole thing. I was like, oh yeah, so I work for this company that Joel founded. And he's like, what company? I was like, Unstoppable Recording Machine. He goes, oh, I listened to that podcast. I'm like, wow, okay. So it's just, it's just funny. But anyway, that all being said, he was like, his recording when we were doing the solo, it was like it had been edited. It like someone had sat and gridded his DIs. I was like, oh my goodness, this is absolutely amazing. This is so good. And like he would play a solo, and I was like, that note you played there, can you play that note like a quarter note earlier? And he was like, yeah, okay, no, just play it, and it'll be exactly what I said. Can you do this? And it was like, oh man, it was just absolute magic.
Yeah. And
I was like, what have you been doing since the last saw you? He was like, oh yeah, I practice an hour a day to a metronome. I'm like, oh wow. So that was absolutely that was awesome. We are going to record an album under the Bezalel name, and I'm going to be bringing, and Liam is really keen to come back and do the solos on that. So that's going to be great.
Nice. That's going to be great. That's going to be awesome. I look forward to hearing that. It'd be nice to have that one on the show at some point too.
Yeah, totally. So that was a real treat, and almost like a circle of life thing as well, because Liam was one of the founding members of Bezalel. So
yeah, and on the last track, just to have him kind of it's funny too, because it's one of those the intro track in a way is later stuff. It's you working. I mean, it's an earlier track, but I mean it really is it's you working with Ben, who was one of the guys that you discovered back around the time you had started this. And, it's very much like a cool representation of one of the awesome opportunities and things that happened as a result of all that time that happened between when you started and, now where we are here listening to this completed record, but yeah, having Liam kind of bookend that with, a really, really great solo from somebody who was part of the process from the beginning, who had maybe stepped out, but kind of, got to step back in and actually be part of that, I think is really cool.
That's interesting, actually, because to kind of extend that further, when Jade and I were first going out, we wanted to see Ailstorm, and we asked Liam to come with us. So the three of us went to see Ailstorm. It was the first gig I ever went to with Jade. And wow. It was either on the way there or on the way back, me and Liam were like, oh man, we should start a band with some kind of gimmick, like the pirate metal thing. We should do a siege metal band, and we should be called Trebuchet. And I had this song written called Battering Ram. So it was like each song it was like Age of Empires metal, basically. It was the concept.
Yeah.
And then when I was starting Bezalel, I was basically just like reached out to Liam and I was like, oh, do you want to just have a jam? And he's like, yeah. And he came over and he's like, do you remember when we were talking about doing that siege metal band? I'm like, yeah. He's like, we should do something like that. I was like, well, what about biblical battle metal? And he's like, oh my goodness. And that's how Bezalel started. Because I invited him over to ask him to start a band, but it turns out when he came over, he asked me to start a band. So it was that was just really funny. But it was just like that kind of loose link, because there's that link between Glory Hammer and Ailstorm. So you've got that.
Yeah.
A really roundabout link between Liam and Ben in that respect as well.
Yeah, for sure. No, and it's just really cool to see. It's one of those things, like you're never going to know any of that just listening to the record, and that's kind of why we're doing this and why we want to do more of these with other people too, because it's one of those, like, really getting the context of what's going on behind a record can really make you appreciate a lot of things you didn't know were there, or couldn't have even known were there. And that's part of why I really like the idea of celebrating the creation process of the record.
I think so. I mean, I remember when Revenge of the Sith came out on DVD, there was this, and I've always been obsessed with watching the making of. Like when Phantom Menace came out, I remember I watched the making of Phantom Menace more than I did watch the movie.
That was me with Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I can imagine. And with Revenge of the Sith, there was this one bit where it was like everything that goes into this, like, I think it's like 12 seconds of footage, and they show you absolutely everything that went into that 12 seconds of footage. And from the writing the script to storyboarding to creating the set and the costumes and the Foley and everything. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. And it made me appreciate the whole movie that much more. And I kind of wish there was some way with albums. Like, I'd happily listen to the Trivium guys spend hours talking about what went into Shogun or something, And it's just like... Yeah,
absolutely.
And I feel like that's kind of what I wanted to do with this, was just talk about all the stuff that's gone into it. It might be there's only like 4 people that are interested in hearing that, and that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. It's just a special chance to kind of get into the heads and the workflow, because, I mean, at the end of the day, most of us are doing this because we have like a deeper connection with the music we're doing. And, on some level, even like Bloody Pineapples is just a fun, silly band. Like for me, I just do it because it's a chance to kind of be creative for no reason and do stuff that I don't have to stress about, like making, whatever, becoming the next Metallica or becoming the next whatever Beatles out of it. Like, it's just us having fun making music. But even that, we still have like there's a lot behind it. And some, for Bloody Pineapples is a lot more the just celebration of being creative with our buddies. There's so many people involved. I think we had 12 or 13 people on that EP,
I think so.
And I mean, it's just kind of the fun of it. But, like every album's going to have its own kind of thing going on. And I think that getting a chance to really hear the stories really, it can make you appreciate it a lot more. And it's like I said with Lord of the Rings, that was mine. I watched Lord of the Rings, and they have the extended editions, which has these just disc after disc after disc of like 5 hours, 6 hours at a time of the entire creation process from soup to nuts. It's like, this is us pitching the idea to New Line Cinema. Here's all the actors talking about their experiences and funny things and all that. And then, you know, you go into the commentaries and there's even more. There's like 4 hours for every movie for multiple. There's like an actors, there's the script writers, there's the directors, and you get even more of those. You find out about like, you know, the Weathertop scene where the hobbits started playing a fake game called like Tig or something like that. And it was just like, it was really just like a couple of them screwing around. And then, you know, it became this like, you know, improv thing. It's like, it's one of those dumb things.
It must be partly a Peter Jackson thing, because I remember being like that with Kong. There being like so much stuff, and they were going into like all the intricacies of rotoscoping and doing the CG people. And
I think it's just that Peter Jackson as a director has so much love for the creation that he has to share it. He doesn't just want to share the movie. He wants people to share in the like joy he gets from making the movie too.
Well, let's hope one day we have a How It's Done with Peter Jackson.
That would be amazing. For those not familiar, How It's Done is a like kind of a it's like a course, basically, just like a course that goes really in depth from URM, and they do them with different producers and stuff. It'd be really cool to get one of those with Peter Jackson.
It's like fly on the wall thing, isn't it?
Yeah. You basically just you sit and watch. You get in and like, you know, the producer will talk about their methods, their, you know, what they're up to, what they're thinking and everything. They'll show you their layout and whatever. But for the most part, you get to kind of just watch them produce a track, you know, or produce a record or whatever. You get to fly on the wall and you get to watch them just like going through the guitar tracks and just like, try that again. You like this? Let's try this part this way. You know, it's great. It's a great learning experience, but there's also just kind of a joy in watching that. And I think that with this podcast, we'll kind of want to capture a little bit of that, just talking to people about the kind of experience they have in creating their records. And everyone's going to be different, you know. Some of them going to be great. Like, you know, Star Wars did not go anything like Lord of the Rings in the making of, even though they were making, you know, episode 2 and Lord of the Rings around the same time.
Yeah.
We'll get Tony on here and he'll have totally different. I mean, he'll have a completely different story. For one, his most recent album was not written since 2016. It just sort of happened like almost overnight. I mean, like I said, he put out a whole other one earlier this year too. You know, his stories are not going to be about what was going on in 2016. Yeah. But yeah, I think having that chance to kind of just get behind the scenes and, you know, really celebrate the creation process is what this is all about. And I look forward to doing more. And thank you, of course, for joining me. You'll hear more from Toby as a co-host, of course.
Of course. And, of course, the album itself is coming out on the 6th of May.
Yep. And you can get that just anywhere you get your albums.
Yeah. They're going to be on Bandcamp and all the streaming services. There's already some YouTube videos. And
so, what is the name and artist?
The artist is Wraak, which is spelt Wraak, which is a Dutch word meaning nemesis. I don't speak any Dutch. I don't have any affiliation with the Dutch. I just thought it was a cool word, so I stole it.
So if that's not what it means, any Dutch listeners, we're sorry.
Yeah. Pretty much. And the album is called Evident Demonstration.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me on the show. I look forward to having you join me as a host and talking to even more people celebrating the creation of these great records.
Should be a good laugh.